birds, wetland birds and so on. Where we're doing predator control, we're seeing numbers come back in various places, and the same goes for, a lot of our other wildlife benefits from that as well. So, our lizards and some of our big invertebrates, mega invertebrates, all benefit from predator control in different habitat types.
Just wonderful stuff, Colin. Thanks for sharing this great news. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Colin.
Yeah, no problem.
There's Colin O'Donnell,
Thank
Department
you.
of Conservation Principal Scientist there. So, Mohoa yellowhead population has just exploded, 14 up to 485. It's been a wonderful panel. Anton, you have a great and well-deserved flight with your family, over to the US. Yeah, kia ora.
Yes.
And Janet Wilson, wonderful to have you on too. I'm Wallace Chapman.
Yes,
a big thanks to my producer Mary. I am back tomorrow, of course, when those horns hit at 3:45. Lisa, Owen and Checkpoint is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, twice in less than 3 months, a Thames Mall is hit in yet another ram raid. The first one hasn't even been solved yet. A frustrated shop owner joins us live. A dress code no-no for the snow, jeans, stretch shoes and hoodies lead to a helicopter rescue on a mountain summit. A senior emergency doctor says it wasn't a tough decision to walk off the job, driven by years of pent-up frustration and concern people are dying. The boss of Qantas heads for the emergency exit after a cluster of botch-ups. We've got the final chapter in library fines and the big scoop, a side of unwanted veggies hidden in your gelato. Yum, yum. Watch us live on Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. More than 5,500 senior doctors and dentists took unprecedented industrial action today with a 2-hour strike from midday. Their union, the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists, says the pay offer from Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand doesn't even cover inflation. Porirua paediatrician Rachel Beard, who joined the picket line outside Wellington Hospital, says the public health system is on the brink of failure because of staff shortages.
Australian consultants, their starting salary is greater than mine, and I'm 53 years old and have never worked outside of the public health system.
Rachel Beard says there's a real risk that hospitals will become just ICUs and EDs in future. Mediated talks resume tomorrow. Te Whatu Ora says it's committed to reaching agreement with the union. Meanwhile, it's rescheduling approximately 250 operations plus outpatient appointments that were deferred because of the strike. Nationals leader says the government's free school lunches program would be improved if the party wins the election. As of last month, school lunches were being provided to more than 230,000 students in almost 1,000 schools, costing up to $8.28 per lunch. Christopher Luxon says he'd make the plan better and introduce more appealing food if he becomes Prime Minister.
The effectiveness of and the delivery of and the improvement in the operations of how the program is delivered or how the food is delivered, it can be looked into. But the bottom line is we are supporters of the school lunch program, making sure it's more efficient and more effective in terms of its delivery and getting it so there's less wastage and more appealing food. That's all good.
The current government approved the $300 million scheme to continue until the end of 2024, despite a budget document showing Treasury didn't support it. The worst youth offenders are being targeted in an intensive program aimed at stopping them committing more crimes. The government announced the program in July and launched it today. The Minister for Children says 60 children between the ages of 10 and 13 who have been continually breaking the law will get mentoring, support and alcohol and drug treatment to try to stop their cycle of crime. Kelvin Davis says the small group of youth who are committing crimes such as ram raids come from difficult backgrounds.
There's violence, there's poverty, there's drugs, there's alcohol, and these issues are often intergenerational and can be almost impossible to escape without the right support.
Kelvin Davis says the public deserves to feel safe, and the new program will include social work for the young offenders' siblings and whānau with the help of community groups. A police officer says 2 men who had to be flown off Mount Ngauruhoe by helicopter are one of the worst examples he's seen of unprepared daywalkers. A group of mountaineers found the pair sitting in the snow near the summit late Saturday afternoon. They were dressed only in street shoes, jeans, t-shirts and cotton sweatshirts. The police say they didn't know how to descend the mountain with no alpine equipment and rapidly increasing icy conditions. Constable Mark Bolton says he doubts the pair would have survived the night if they hadn't been found. 2 other climbers had previously tried to convince the men to turn back earlier in their climb. And the Council of Trade Unions has closed its Wellington office and contacted the police after a member of the public reacted to the attack ads on Nationals leader Christopher Luxon. The CTU says it had a concerning communication from one person and out of an abundance of caution has now closed off all floors to public access. But its secretary, Melissa Ansell-Bridges, says it's business as usual and the union will continue with its election campaign. To sport now, and Black Caps batter Kane Williamson has no doubts he'll be able to contribute to the side during next month's World Cup in India. New Zealand Cricket has confirmed that Williamson, who suffered a knee injury during the IPL in April, will be a part of the 15-player squad. While he's unsure if he'll play in the opening game, Williamson says he has the best interests of the team at heart.
I only want to be there if I can add some value and I'm fit and ready to go. So this next period of time is still important to keep putting in the work and seeing that improvement. But it's nice to be in the position now where there has been a lot of improvement and to be selected in the squad.
The rest of the World Cup squad will be named on Monday. Daniil Medvedev is into the US Open tennis quarterfinals for the 4th time in 5 years. He had to battle back from a set down to beat Australian Alex de Minaur to progress to the final 8 in New York. Defending champion Carlos Alcaraz is also through to the next round. On the women's side of the draw, last year's finalist Ons Jabeur has been knocked out in the 4th round. New Zealand's Erin Rutliff will play in the doubles quarterfinals tomorrow morning with her Canadian partner. And Wellington Phoenix Women's Club captain Lily Oldfield will sit out upcoming A-League football campaign as she requires back surgery. The experienced goalkeeper, who was the club's first signing in 2021, also missed last season through injury. That's the news.
Labour takes the gloves off.
Christopher Luxon called low-income New Zealanders bottom feeders and went around the world calling New Zealand a wet, whiny and negative country.
National hits back.
These are attacks that are clearly very much negative, nasty, personal.
And the Gore District Council's chief executive quits.
This issue goes right back to the election of Ben Bell as mayor on October the 8th last year. Mr Perry and Mr Bell didn't get along. That much was clear straight away.
The Cut and Thrust. Morning Report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland, occasional showers, some heavy, thunderstorms and downpours possible in the west this afternoon and evening. Auckland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumarunui. Periods of rain, possibly heavy, easing later tomorrow. From Gisborne to Wairarapa, also for Whanganui to Wellington, including Taihape. Scattered rain becoming mostly fine in Hawke's Bay and Gisborne tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller. Rain heavy at times, easing to showers early Wednesday. Then rain again from the evening. Westland and Fiordland, rain about Westland. Spreading elsewhere this evening and becoming heavy in Westland. Canterbury, North Otago and Dunedin, mostly cloudy with patchy rain or drizzle. High cloud tomorrow, possible light rain from the afternoon. For the remainder of Otago and for Southland, high cloud increasing today with scattered light rain overnight and tomorrow morning. And for Rekohu, Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, the odd shower tomorrow. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at around 20 past 5.
Nā mihi Evie, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A Thames shopping centre has been hit in a ram raid for a second time in less than 3 months, leaving locals angry and frustrated. The stolen car used to try and smash into Goldfields Mall at about 3 this morning was found abandoned outside. The thieves managed to get into at least one store. In July, the mall was hit in a super-sized ram raid where 5 cars careered through the security doors in a smash and grab, targeting a vape store and a cell phone kiosk. 2 of those stolen cars were later found in Huntly. Now, no one has been held responsible for that crime yet. Well, joining us now is James O'Grady, the owner of Boots and All, the shop hit in this morning's ram raid at Goldfields. James, this isn't great, is it?
No, it's the last thing we really need with the way business has been for the last 3 years. And I've been here 28 years and honestly, I feel sick to my stomach. I haven't eaten all day. We've just been trying to put the shop back together. They managed to ram through my door with a big steel chair, and it's taken me probably 2 years to get the stock that they stole. It's taken 2 years of saving and slowly building up. They targeted me only this time because they wanted my watches and the guest jewellery. We had really nice watches because nobody else was selling a decent watch in the town, so we thought we'd do it. And it's taken 2 years to build that range, and they've come along and smashed all the cabinets and taken in all of that jewellery. So just before Christmas, which we were trying to stock up to get enough into the shop, they've gone and taken it all away, basically.
Pretty soul-destroying stuff, eh, James?
I do feel like crying, but I've been running the shop all day and we've had a lot of people come in. My customers have been very nervous since the first ram raid about coming and shopping. Now they're very angry because I've been here a long time. We do a lot of good for the community. We help out the elderly a lot. We give away free greenstone to the young kids and stuff like that. So we're very well liked in the town. So I've had a lot of people coming in to saying that they're very sympathetic and they're very sorry that it happened to our shop because we do try very hard. We're shoe repairers, key cutters, engravers, so we're not rich shop. And we try to do these good things for our community. So it has been a real punch in the stomach, really. It's not nice.
It sounds like they cased you out, as you say. So you tell us about what watches have gone.
Timex watches, which were the first people to ever make a wristwatch in 1854. So we do a lot of watch straps and batteries, so we realise how good watches really are out there. And a lot of them aren't up to scratch, really. You're paying a lot for a name, where Timex have been around for, like I said, 1854, so they're very good quality. And all of the guest jewellery, which I've been getting in for the males, there was thousands of dollars sitting out there as well, all in guest jewellery for our local people, and that's all gone as well.
So, James, they've used a car or tried to use a car, but ultimately how did they smash through your door? You said with some kind of chair?
First, they used the car to try to ram into the mall, and that didn't work. So then they used hammers to smash the glass to get into the mall. Then they've come around to my shop and they've used a big steel chair that sits outside for my customers, and they've used that to break through the door to get into the shop.
Have you seen any CCTV video? Do you have any idea about the sort of age of these people?
They were all balaclavaed up and had gloves. There was only 2 people. They didn't look as professional as the first crew that come in, because there was 12 people then and 12 minutes, and they probably did $300,000 or $400,000 worth of damage. And the police have actually warned us not to go publicising or showing footage, because that's half the reason they do that, to try to make themselves famous.
What else have the police said to you about tracking these people down? Because we understand from making some inquiries today that they haven't found those responsible for the first time round.
No, they haven't. They've found the 3 cars which were used in it. They've found that already. But not a lot that they can really do with balaclavas. They've taken fingerprints, but they did have gloves on, so there's not a lot to track them down, really. There's only 7,000 people in the town. I don't really think it was locals, because we sort of know everybody in this town as well. So no, it's shocking, miss. It's really shocking. You do good stuff in a town and then things like this happen. It sort of takes away your attitude towards your customers, and you start looking at people as if everybody's a criminal, which we don't judge anybody in my shop. We treat everybody well. We sell a lot of greenstone and taonga. I'm actually Irish and Maori myself, so I've got a lot of Maori blood running through me. Same with the other guy. I'm from Kaitaia. He's from Rotorua, so we're very Kiwi. But again, we're old school. This would never have happened in my day. I sort of blame the government a little bit by taking away Dad's power to be a father, because kids have got no consequences nowadays. When I was a kid, I loved my mother and I feared my father. And I
James, I'm really sorry about what's happened there at the store, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for talking to us. That is James O'Grady, who's the owner of Boots and All, their store that's got hit again at Goldfields, the mall. It's the second time the mall's been hit in the last 3 months. 13 minutes after 5, Kia amo tunu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Senior doctors and dentists have walked off the job en masse today for the first time ever over their deadlocked pay negotiations. Te Whatu Ora, Health New Zealand, says about 250 planned care procedures would be affected, but stressed it had contingencies in place. It maintains its latest deal is a fair one, but the doctors say it has failed to keep up with inflation. Nationwide, there were picket lines outside 28 hospitals from Whangarei to Invercargill, with doctors asking if New Zealand wants a public health system or not. Ruth Hill reports.
Auckland City Emergency Doctor Amanda Rosenberg was among the more than 5,500 doctors and dentists to strike today. She says they're taking this action for patients.
With staff shortages, increased workplace violence, we're just not able to deliver the care that we want to, which brings us to the last resort, which is striking.
Medical oncologist David Porter says the preponderance of grey hair on the picket line points to the fact there are few trainees coming through the system. Young doctors are going straight overseas or into the private sector to pay off their massive student loans.
The last 8 times I've been on call, 7 times there was no junior doctor to cover the roster, so we had to do it 4 of those times, actually do the junior doctor's job, and we're doing that during the day, during the weekend, on top of our own jobs, and it's not sustainable.
Outside Wellington Regional Hospital, about 100 doctors joined the picket line, some still in their surgical scrubs. Radiologist Leo Kalarakel says the money is the least of it. The whole system is failing. He says for him it's the moral injury that comes from having to comfort a patient who's had her urgent procedure cancelled yet again and being gaslit by management and the government.
The waiting lists have gone up, but they will deny that. They'll say that they will deny that fact, and they say we're putting more and more money into it. The reality is they really are.
Developmental paediatrician Rachel Beard says starting salaries for consultants in Australia are higher than what she's paid after more than a decade in the public system.
The public needs to know that if they don't change things, that we'll lose our public health system. When I started as a consultant over a decade ago, there was just no public work, private work for paediatrics. It was just considered not a thing, really. Whereas now, lots of people are talking about doing it. And our hospitals will just become ICUs and EDs.
A survey released by the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists this week found nearly 60% of members already work outside the public system, and another 13% are actively considering the move. Te Whatu Ora says its offer of between 7 and 12.9% over 17 months is the best it can do without making cuts in other parts of the health system. However, the union says those figures include the existing annual progression increases for doctors in the early years of their career. Executive Director Sarah Dalton, who was at the picket line outside Auckland City Hospital today, says the offer actually amounts to a pay cut for the 3rd year in a row.
They haven't been able to explain to us what fair means in the less than inflation adjusted offer, and that's a real frustration for our members who are going into work every day with not enough colleagues to work safely.
Union President Julian Vyas, a paediatrician who was at the Christchurch protest, says the standoff has been building for years as doctors and dentists have made many sacrifices to keep the health system afloat. He notes even Te Whatu Ora admits the system is short 1,700 doctors.
The workarounds, the plugging the gaps, the shortfall of staff, of other specialists that people do locums and do additional cover for, all that underlies why we feel so aggrieved.
Te Whatu Ora says it's committed to reaching a settlement with senior doctors and dentists, but can't comment further ahead of mediated talks with the union tomorrow. It says it appreciates some patients and staff may have been anxious about the strike and thanks them for their understanding. Meanwhile, it's working on rescheduling the approximately 250 planned care procedures, plus the outpatient appointments that were deferred because of the strike. 2 more strikes are planned this month if mediation fails again.
And the head of Wairarapa Hospital's emergency department, Dr Norman Gray, says it wasn't a hard decision to walk off the job. With years of pent-up frustration and concerns, people are dying because they should be getting better care.
The problem is patients have to wait because we're understaffed and under-resourced, and that waiting causes suffering, both psychologically and physically, and it becomes a very inefficient system. And because most doctors and nurses are caring, the staff get quite stressed because they feel responsible for the patients that are there. They don't have any real control over giving them, the best of care. And this eventually leads to, to burnout and early retirement. And also it becomes inefficient once you get queuing in ED or you're getting big wait lists for patients for other services, you lose the efficiency of the system, which is already, greatly understaffed and under-resourced.
If you're working on a day like that, is it every day that that's happening?
Not every day, just most days.
And how does that leave you personally feeling if you're in there and you're seeing patients backed up?
I feel quite sad. I think most of my colleagues feel more stressed than sad, but perhaps because I'm a bit older, I can I feel the emotion that these people are suffering. And it sounds a bit corny, but it literally brings a tear to my eye.
Is this system killing people?
We have a higher mortality because of the inefficiencies, yes.
And so what would solve that? What would give you better outcomes?
More space, generally, but the key to it is people. The health system is run and depends on people doing physical work. So we need more feet on the ground. And that's really what this strike action's over, is to get more feet on the ground. And for that, you need to train people, which takes a long time. So in the meantime, you have to retain the people you've got, and we have to recruit from overseas to make up the difference.
And
at the moment, our conditions aren't good enough to either retain or recruit people.
Right, so that was what I was going to ask you. The money you get now, is that not enough to keep you in the job, and is it not enough to make New Zealand look attractive to medical professionals?
Yeah, well, it's enough to keep me in the job because I'm, at the end of my career. But it's certainly not attractive to a new specialist who's probably got a family, a student loan and a mortgage. And it's certainly not attractive if you're coming from overseas. For example, Australia's roughly double what we get.
Okay, so in your ED, how many staff short would you be at any given moment?
I haven't been, including nurses and healthcare assistants as well as the doctors, I've only had 2 days where we've been fully staffed for 24 hours since last October.
What?
And we rely heavily on locums, which make up 20% of our medical shifts. Sorry, 60% of our medical shifts.
60% of your medical shifts?
Yeah, done by doctors who aren't our full-time ED doctors. So we rely heavily on locums. And of the ED doctors we have regularly, 3/4 are from overseas. So you can see how important recruitment is and how important retention is.
So what's the number then? What's the number that you need to see? Because obviously negotiations have stalled.
Well, overall, the country, I'd have to sit down, just work out exactly the FTE I'd need in my department. But overall, and we're 1% of the overall, the whole system's short of at least 1,700 specialists. And I think that's a conservative measure.
If you do not get what you want, are you prepared to go out on strike again?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no doubt.
And how long for? You've got two more days planned.
I think as much and as long as it takes, because there may be short-term pain for a lot of people, but there's going to be a lot more pain if we don't do something about the system that's declining at the moment. So long term, there'll be a lot less pain if we can get some action now.
As a doctor, you must appreciate for the people who were due to have procedures today, and Te Whatu Ora says it's about 250 operations that were cancelled. It must be devastating for them.
Oh, it is. Some people would have taken leave and planned, have friends and family and support. Absolutely. But again, I think you've got to put the ball back in Health New Zealand's court. We're propping up the system with lack of numbers and they're relying on our goodwill. And all that does is enable the system to keep failing. So I don't want to be part of that enabling.
And that is Dr. Norman Gray, who's the head of Wairarapa Hospital's Emergency Department. 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let us know what you think of senior doctors walking off the job today, about 5,500 of them. And also, the Thames Mall Goldfields gets hit again in a ram raid, second time in less than 3 months. What to do? It is time for the headlines now. Anaya Evie, mina pitspitsa kōrero.
The owner of a Thames shop ram raided early this morning has told Checkpoint that it took him 2 years to get the watches and jewellery the thieves stole. James O'Grady, owner of Boots and All, says he feels sick to his stomach after the second ram raid on the Goldfields Mall since July. Meanwhile, the government today launched its intensive program to steer some of the worst young offenders away from crimes, including ram raids. Minister for Children, Kelvin Davis, says the 60 children aged between 10 and 13 come from difficult backgrounds. Te Whatu Ora Health New Zealand says today's 2-hour strike by senior doctors and dentists affected about 250 planned care procedures around the country. More than 5,500 members of the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists walked out in protest at stalled pay negotiations and workforce shortages, with picket lines outside 28 hospitals. The White House says North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, is planning to visit Russia for his first talks with President Vladimir Putin in 4 years. It's believed the visit is part of Moscow's efforts to boost supplies of shells and missiles for its invasion of Ukraine. And 2 men had to be helicoptered off Mount Ngauruhoe at the weekend after making the climb in street shoes, jeans, T-shirts and cotton sweatshirts. Constable Mark Bolton says he doubts they would have survived the night had mountaineers not found them in the snow near the summit late on Saturday afternoon. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic in Auckland on State Highway 1 heading south out of the city just before Gillies Ave on-ramp, a crash that was partially blocking the left lane just before 5 has now been cleared of lanes, if you're wondering while you're sitting in traffic. Our next traffic news and headlines are at about 20 to 6.
Kia ora rā iho. Days before the official announcement of the Cricket World Cup squad, Black Caps fans have been given some unexpected news. New Zealand Cricket has confirmed Kane Williamson will be included in the 15-man squad for the tournament in India next month. Williamson injured his knee playing in the Indian Premier League in March and had been considered an outside chance of being named for a 4th ODI World Cup, and we're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Yeah, anyone who saw the vision of him sort of going down at the time, this seems a pretty quick turnaround. Was he targeting this tournament?
Yeah, so that was an injury that normally takes 9 to 12 months to be an ACL injury, right? So this is over time, though. Is increasingly seeing athletes actually returning from this injury in ahead of time. It's maybe as science and technology is moving along and athletes are actually learning off each other around what is the best preparation and rehabilitation for this. Williamson has described it as a long slog, this rehabilitation, and as much as the World Cup was a carrot for this, he'd said the whole time that it was actually the health of his knee which was the priority for him. He's perhaps looking beyond this tournament. He's still got some playing days in him and also looking post-career. But in terms of this tournament, Williamson does admit to having some doubts that he'd be fit in time.
When it first happened and I learned a little bit more about what it meant, I sort of thought that it probably wouldn't be on the cards. And it's really, really exciting to be sitting here now and looking at the prospect of taking part in the World Cup.
Now, Williamson is known as a player who likes to put in a bit of preparation, whether this is for any game, let alone a big tournament like a World Cup. So he hasn't actually had any game time since that injury, and he's said that it's not exactly ideal preparation, but he's had no choice for that. So in terms of, he's with the Black Caps currently in England, training alongside the team which are over there. He's not taking part in any of these games, but he's saying he's batting in the nets around 100%. Running's not quite at 100%, but it's actually the change of direction, which is the thing that he needs to work on.
Makes me just cringe at the thought, twisting your knees and limbs when you've had a surgery. Ugh.
And he said himself that he's learned some more intricacies about the knee, things he never really knew about, and he's had to put up with that as well. So he's actually been quite coy about his involvement in the World Cup. He hasn't said that he will be available for that first game against England. So I guess we'll have to wait and see as to when he actually does take the field for New Zealand at the tournament.
Interesting. Okay, talking of tournament prep, France is beefing up security ahead of the Rugby World Cup.
They are. So they're sending out 7,000 extra security personnel. So this is on top of 5,000 private security personnel who are already in place across the tournament, which is across the country. So that was from the France's sports minister, and I think it's perhaps on people's mind because this game will be held at Stade de France, so that's the All Blacks versus France, the opening game. They're saying that the security will be actually monitoring this tournament quite a few hours before tip-off. Last year during Champions League football, there was an incident with Liverpool fans not being able to get into the stadium for more than half an hour before a game against Real Madrid. So that was actually, police were filmed outside the stadium at that time, using tear gas on fans, herding them into pens outside the stadium. So it's all of that kind of behaviour, I guess, that have made the rest of the world a bit alert as to what is going on in France. But the French government are giving everyone reassurances that this tournament will go smoothly.
We will see. Thank you, Felicity. That is sports reporter Felicity Reid. It seems blind good luck is what's kept a pair of hapless mountain climbers alive and has prompted a strong warning from police. Another climbing party stumbled across the pair dressed in street clothes, including jeans and hoodies, near the summit of Mount Ngauruhoe on Saturday night as bad weather was closing in. They had no idea how to get off the mountain, sparking a helicopter rescue. Senior Constable Conrad Smith reckons it's one of the worst examples he's seen of ill-prepared people.
On Saturday, two males wandered up the Mangaspofo Valley on the Tongariro Alpine Crossing and then made their way up to the summit of Mount Ngauruhoe. It was fully alpine conditions, so snow and ice, and they got all the way to the summit during the day, but then just as it was getting evening, two mountaineers found them at the top of the summit on Ngauruhoe.
How were they dressed?
Okay, so they had street shoes on, like sneakers. One had jeans on and the other had tracksuit pants, just fleecy tracksuit pants, and cotton T-shirts and cotton hoodies, and that was about it. That was all they had.
What temperature do you reckon it would have been?
Well, I don't know. It was during the day, but it was dropping real quickly because it was getting into the evening. So the problem there is that the snow was icing up real quick, so there's no way they would have been able to descend their way back down Ngauruhoe safely.
And I know there were some language difficulties, but I mean, the people who stumbled across them, did they talk to them about how they were going to get down?
Yeah, they tried to communicate with them about what the best plan was, and they actually ended up discouraging them from trying to make their way down because it was just too dangerous. So they contacted police and we got a rescue plan underway.
It sounds like they're alive because of blind good luck, really.
Yeah, they definitely weren't dressed to spend the night up there. It would have been very, very cold, and I doubt they would have survived that. And I also don't think there's any way they would have been able to get down the mountain with the conditions icing up and getting slippery. If they had tried, they would have just come to grief with a big fall, big slip.
What kind of walk did they think they were going on?
You need to ask them that. I'm not sure, and it's quite frustrating because, like, the Department of Conservation, they do a lot of work pushing safety messages. They've got visitor centre staff that are there to talk and share their local knowledge and help people. They've got signage. The signs they walk past are very informative all the way, and online on their website as well. They've got heaps of information there about all these walks and what they need and what to expect. So it's our job to try and educate these people, and it's frustrating when they don't listen to all the advice and information that's out there.
Is it quite common for people to be dressed in a way that they are ill-prepared for the conditions?
Well, the Tongariro Alpine Crossing gets, pre-COVID, it was pushing about 150,000 people doing that walk, and it is the most search and rescued, the track in New Zealand with the most search and rescues. So we do get a lot of jobs up there, and it is something that people could dress better for. But in winter, it's an alpine mountain, and there's snow and ice up there, and people just have got to remember that.
Just to labour the point here, Constable, what was it like on the mountain? So full snow, freezing cold? Is that what we're talking here?
So full snow, yes, but it was a fine bluebird day with sunshine, so it wasn't super cold during the day. But as soon as that sun dropped down in the evening, and it dropped, the temperature plummets really quickly down into the negatives, and that's when the snow iced up and got really slippery and slick. So whilst they were able to walk up in the softer snow, they were way out of their league as soon as it started to get icy.
So just to recap, normal street shoes, jeans, a pair of trackies, some cotton shirts, T-shirts and a couple of hoodies. So in the scheme of things, how does this rate in terms of people being ill-prepared in the cases that you've seen?
Yeah, I've been involved in search and rescue on the Central North Island for 17 years, and I think this would be in the top couple of jobs that I've dealt with in terms of being ill-prepared. There's they needed crampons, ice axes, helmets, avalanche transceivers, probes, shovels, all the alpine kit, and they had none of it. But not only do they need that stuff, they need to know how to use it as well. And they just had no idea, unfortunately.
Bloody lucky to be alive, it sounds like.
They are very fortunate to be alive. Very fortunate that the two mountaineers found them at the top there and were able to call help for them.
And that's Senior Constable Conrad Smith, who is just appealing to people going up mountains, be prepared. It is 27 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is time for the business news now. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. Nona, let's start with the banks, right? They're wasting no time boosting their earnings and margins. How much are we talking about?
Well, the margins on the wholesale rate, which hasn't changed, just so you know, was 1%, and now it's about 1.3 for some of the banks. So it's considerably more than what the margin was previously. And part of the reason is that banks can charge what they like for interest, as you know. I mean, the Reserve Bank sets the official cash rate, and then there's the wholesale rates, which are often a mix of what you can get at the bank, but also overseas. In any case, the margins have increased. That's according to a large mortgage broker, who also said that consumers or people who are looking to finance a house are really shopping around for the best rates possible, which tends to be either very, very short rates or longer term ones, but also they're staying away from the variable rates because that scares everyone. There you go.
Okay.
So shop around. Apparently it makes a big difference.
Alan Joyce from Qantas, he'll be hoping the oxygen mask falls shortly. He's bringing forward his retirement. What's going on, Nona?
So he's supposed to retire in November, and he's a long-serving chief executive. He announced his retirement some time ago, and he's been in the job for 15 years, and he's decided to leave early, so no party, no champagne, I guess. But it turns out that it coincides with charges
decided to leave early.
Yes, it coincides with charges being brought by the Australian regulator there, concerned that Qantas had allegedly sold tickets on flights that had already been cancelled, like about 8,000 tickets. So this is not something that's allowed under law, and so they've got to sue them. We'll see what happens with that and other things. They also cancelled, I guess, frequent flyer points or credits, credits, which were supposed to expire at the end of this year. These are the ones for people,
credits.
COVID credits. So they've cancelled those. They cancelled them, but now they've put them back on so as to appease their angry travelers. So, yeah. It's not a nice scene, and I guess apparently he said that he was leaving early due to the focus on Qantas and events of the past without elaborating.
Okay.
So happy retirement, Mr. Joyce.
Tell us about the markets, please, Nona.
Okie dokie. So Sky City, we just wanted to bring you up to date on what happened after yesterday. Yep. So the share price did rebound earlier in the day, but ended up just steady with yesterday's close at $2.02. The New Zealand Top 50 Index overall fell 0.2% today, and that's in line with what we've been seeing in Asia. That was a 76-point drop to 11,437. The New Zealand dollar is also under pressure, and that follows on from the Reserve Bank of Australia holding interest rates this afternoon. So their official cash rate is unchanged. I think it's, I didn't write it down, 4.1%. And so we got the dollar at 59.1 US cents, 92.1 Australian, 46.8 British pence. Oh, Lisa, I know it makes you sad, but there you go.
Every time, Nona. Thank you, Nona. Nona Peltier there with Business News. Dunedin Council wants the government to help fund managed retreat from flood-prone properties in the south of the city. It's already in discussions with Treasury about what it calls a voluntary acquisition scheme that would see property bought on the open market over decades. The government's recently agreed to a 50-50 buyout deal with areas hit by recent extreme weather events, including Tairawhiti, Hawke's Bay and Auckland. The Dunedin Mayor says he wants to get ahead of the problem in his district. And Jules Raddick joins us now. Kia ora, Jules.
Kia ora. How are you, Lisa?
I'm very well, thanks. Can you just explain to us how you would see this working in an arrangement with the government?
Well, a lot of the properties in South Dunedin really could do with a land use change. So whether that, there's a range of different purposes we'd put them to. So the name of the game is to get ahead of the situation. And so what we saw recently in Auckland was there's some areas that got inundated and other areas that had been built in a more adaptive style to cope with heavy delugic rainfall events survived fine.
So in post-Cyclone Gabrielle, the government has agreed to 50-50 buyouts with various councils. Is that what you would like for your district in a preemptive strike, for them to kick in 50% of the cost of these properties?
Well, not so much. At this stage, we've worked out a financial scheme. We've offered them a financial arrangement, and I don't know that it's based on 50%, but it's certainly based on funding and getting ahead of the whole situation. So their expectation is that over time it would be self-funding.
Okay, so initially how much support would you need from the government then, ballpark?
Well, we're talking $25 million the first year.
Okay, and how many properties would you be looking to buy up?
Well, over time, we're talking about 65 properties a year.
And what would happen to them? What would happen to the land?
They would have land use change. So we've got a range of adaptations, to adapt the landscape for climate change. So whether they're ponds or pumping areas or wetlands, or just the use of the type of housing that there is made more resilient. And because we're looking to do it on a voluntary basis, just on a market basis, we're not trying to go in and change one whole area in an overall situation all at once. We're looking to do it in a gradual fashion.
Can the government afford to do something like that? Because increasingly people are going to be asking, right?
Yes. Well, I think it's going to be much cheaper to get ahead of the situation than be behind the situation and face a major event. So changing the landscape to be adapted for the climate situation is likely to be far less expensive in the long term.
But whose responsibility do you think that is? Is that a central government responsibility, or what responsibility should council take, for example, for allowing properties to be built in these areas in the first place?
Well, historically, the properties we're talking about in Dunedin have been there 100 years or more. So people weren't thinking about it way back then. So they've been there a long time.
Yeah, but would you expect the same kind of assistance from the government for more recently built properties that are in areas where retreat is a likelihood?
Well, we have properties built in this area more recently, and they're built in a much more resilient fashion. So they're built above the well above the highest rainfall or flood event that we've had, and they've also built on a different type of foundation so that they're much more resilient. So we've already introduced those kinds of measures to properties that are being built now.
How receptive is the government to your pitch?
Well, they're thinking about it, and I think they don't want to be in an ongoing position of never knowing what's around the corner and being faced with a sudden, huge delugic event that causes a calamity, as we've seen around the country this year. And then it's always picking up the pieces and you have to do a whole lot all at once. So our approach is to make a start. And so we're still working through this with the community, but we'd like to make a start as soon as possible, and so that it eases the shock, it eases the cost over a period of time.
Do you have a timeline, Jules? Because you'll be acutely aware that there's an election just around the corner.
Yes, well, naturally we'd like maybe some response before the election.
With a commitment of some...
Well, naturally, we would hope there'd be some sort of commitment with that.
Appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. That's Dunedin's Mayor, Jules Raddick there. It is 17 minutes away from 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do let us know your thoughts on that one. Homai o whakaaro, should the government be involved in preemptively buying out properties that could be at risk of climate change? What should the contribution be? More councils are probably going to be asking after Cyclone Gabrielle. Also interested in your comments on the Ram Raid situation. The Thames Mall's been hit again twice in less than 3 months. And also doctors on strike today, so lots to talk about. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's get to the headlines now. Ko Ewe Ano tēnei.
The head of Wairarapa Hospital's emergency department, Dr. Norman Gray, has told Checkpoint the country has a shortage of 1,700 health specialists and patients deserve better. Dr. Gray was among more than 5,500 members of the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists who went on strike for the first time today. Te Whatu Ora says mediated talks with the union will continue tomorrow. After crying foul over ads rolled out by the Council of Trade Union attacking his party, National's campaign manager Chris Bishop is defending social media posts aimed at Labour leader Chris Hipkins. The Prime Minister says one ad on National's page says even 8-year-olds know better than Hipkins. Meanwhile, the Council of Trade Unions has contacted the police and closed its Wellington office after a member of the public reacted to yesterday's ads attacking National leader Christopher Luxon. The CTU says it's acting out of an abundance of caution and will continue with its election campaign. The Cuban government says it's uncovered a human trafficking ring aimed at recruiting its citizens to fight for Russia in Ukraine. Havana hasn't said who was behind the operation, and Russia hasn't commented. And the First Lady of the United States, Jill Biden, has tested positive for COVID-19 days before her husband is due to meet world leaders at the G20 summit in India. The White House says President Biden will still travel to Delhi. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, no incidents to report currently around the country, although heavy rain is expected overnight in Westland, so take care on those roads. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Thank you, Evie. And we've just got some news to hand. The police have issued a media statement. They now have a warrant to arrest Tom Phillips. And you'll probably remember Tom Phillips is the man's been missing almost a year from Marakopa with his 3 children. The statement says the following: Waikato police investigating an aggravated robbery in Tikawiti from May have now obtained a warrant to arrest Tom Phillips. Recent developments in our ongoing inquiries have led police to charge Mr Phillips with aggravated robbery, aggravating wounding and unlawfully possessing a firearm. In May, police appealed for information after 2 people entered a bank on Rora Street, Tikawiti, and demanded cash. Both were armed and fled the scene on a black farm-style motorbike. We're yet to clarify or to identify the other person involved. Police have been seeking to speak with Mr Phillips for some time. We have issued several appeals for information following sightings of Mr Phillips over the last couple of months. They're urging members of the public to phone in any sightings to police on 111, and they are urging they're urging people not to take action themselves, as Mr Phillips potentially still has a firearm in his possession. So, if you are just joining us, a warrant to arrest Tom Phillips in relation to charges of aggravated robbery, aggravated wounding and unlawfully possessing a firearm. Okay, politicians are ramping up their campaigns. Oops, are we still going to that one? Let me check. One moment. Politicians are ramping up their campaigns after the major launches at the weekend, mixing and mingling with school children and waving signs at motorists from Wellington's Basin Reserve. While there will be an economic focus this week, National and Labour are still scrapping over tax treaties and who's employing the dirtiest political tactics. Our political editor, Jane Patterson reports. Happy birthday,
some birthday greetings from primary school children in Wainuiomata for Labour leader Chris Hipkins, turning 45 today. But not such a pleasant gift, the latest polling showing Labour dropping further into the 20s.
I don't place too much stock in it.
Chris Hipkins was doing the rounds of schools in Wainui this morning to highlight government money that's gone directly to help upgrade the local high school. Another issue he was keen to raise, any move to spend less money on the government's free school lunches program.
You hear the National Party talking about the significant increase in government spending and they call it wasteful spending. Actually, when you're spending money on kids with additional learning needs, I don't think that's wasteful spending at all.
National leader Christopher Luxon says he's committed to the policy.
We are supporters of the school lunch program, making sure it's more efficient and more effective in terms of its delivery and getting it so there's less wastage.
Chris Hipkins also flagging ACT's proposal to sell assets including KiwiRail, Transpower and Cordia.
The National Party need to be clear what they will allow to be on the chopping block under a National Act government.
Gripping more printouts of National Party ads, it was another round of show and tell.
This one's from Chris Bishop's own Facebook page where he basically says that I've done F all for 6 years. That was on his own Facebook page.
Well, I haven't seen some of the ads that Chris Hipkins is apparently obsessed with. He should focus on his own. He should focus on his own policies.
ACT leader David Seymour weighed in, accusing Labour of spreading misinformation.
That's what Donald Trump does, is he tries to bamboozle people with his alternative facts and mistruths.
Nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
And is Mr Seymour prepared to commit to staying away from the personal?
We're going to point out the flaws in other people's policies, and occasionally if anyone's deeply offended then we're very sorry, but I don't think you see us, for example, putting up pictures of people designed to make them look personally ugly. We've got so many more things we could criticise about Chris Luxon's policies, apart from the fact that he looks a little bit like Rob Muldoon.
And on business matters, the Deloitte and Chapman Trip Election Survey out today found the high cost of doing business was the standout concern, with the vast majority surveyed blaming changes made by the government.
Jane Patterson reporting there. It is 10 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. 2 years ago, bookworms across the Auckland region rejoiced as Auckland libraries stopped issuing fines for late returns. Since then, more than 1 million items have been returned after their due date, meaning millions of dollars of potential fines going unclaimed. But despite the loss of revenue, librarians say it's been an overwhelmingly positive change. Tom Taylor finds out why.
Auckland Library members can borrow up to 35 items at any one time. Even for the most voracious of readers, that's a big stack of books to get through. And until a couple of years ago, it could have resulted in a big stack of fines if returned late. Jeremy's visiting Onehunga Library on a hunt for information about local cycling trails. He's just returned to Auckland after living in Napier and jokes that he was chased out of town for the late fees he accrued there.
I didn't use the library in Napier for quite a long time. Not for that reason particularly, but yeah. It still certainly weighed on the back of my mind.
Jeremy can breathe a sigh of relief because since he's been back, Napier libraries have also jumped aboard the fine-free bandwagon. He's now a conscientious returner of books.
I always entered it in my diary when the book's due back, so, I would make sure I got it back on time.
And Jeremy's not alone. Although Auckland Library's anti-fine policy has only been in place a short time, there are early signs that people are actually returning more books when they're meant to than before. In the 5 years before fines were removed, an average 3.6 million items were returned late each year. But in the past year, just 600,000 items were overdue. The library's community hub manager for Onehunga and Oranga, Danny Miller-Kareko, says it shows the trust model is working.
When you give people an opportunity to show that they are trustworthy, they live up to it.
After the 28-day loan period, fines used to mount up by $1 per item per day. Since the penalties were scrapped, Danny says people have felt more ownership of their libraries.
Even without the threat of punishment, people want to take care of the resources and assets in the community. They want to see things available for other people, other families, and generally, out of the goodness of their hearts and, their sense of duty and civic responsibility to the rest of the community, people do bring their books back.
For librarians, awkward conversations about overdue books used to be a part of the job. But Danny says that usually just made people ashamed and sometimes disengaged with the library altogether.
We are treating it with perhaps a little bit more empathy and understanding than what our approach was in the past, and leaving a bit more space for that human element of, people aren't machines and they're not perfect, and I'm sure we've all, done something late at one stage in our life.
In the 5 years before late fees were removed, they delivered Auckland libraries an average $1.2 million a year in revenue, enough to pay the salaries of 10 senior librarians. But Connected Communities coach Monique Nathu says revenue was never the goal, and now fines are gone, librarians are freed up to do the jobs they were trained to do.
Our team members in our spaces just have been able to kind of reach out to other communities, vulnerable communities that were maybe a little bit more reluctant to use our library spaces and use our library services.
Monique says libraries have been reaching out to migrant and refugee communities who are often pleasantly surprised about the lack of fines.
This is something they may not have experienced back home, so for them it's a really positive experience here in Tamaki Makaurau.
And a reminder, just because there are no overdue fees doesn't mean you can just keep an item forever. Auckland libraries will still charge members for lost or damaged items.
And that was Tom Taylor reporting. It is a novel way to get your daily veggie quota. A Kiwi ice cream company is using reject gold kumara that would otherwise be destined for landfill to make gelato. Island Gelato Co. says recent flooding has seen the price of kumara reach record highs, almost $13 a kilo in some stores. But at the same time, misshapen, outsized and overripe kumara are being dumped. So it started working with food producers to rescue the root veg and turn it into ice-cold gold. Island Gelato food patisserie engineer Hannah Clark joins us now. Hannah, it does sound a bit like a science experiment. How complicated is it to make a gelato out of a root vegetable?
Kia ora, thanks for having me. It is a little bit more complicated than people think, but some vegetables like the kumara, we're really lucky that some of the chemical properties change once it goes through a freezing process. So we're able to utilise that and make a really smooth, creamy product that people enjoy.
Yeah, because as a vegetable, it has a pretty high carb and sugar content, doesn't it?
Yes, you're right. And the high starch level becomes sugar in your bloodstream. And utilising that, like I said, it goes through a chemical change once it's become frozen. So it's almost like a custard in the texture once it's become frozen. Yeah.
There are lots of sort of misshapen veg that get dumped or sent off to places never to be seen again because they're not attractive as the other ones. Did you pick kumara, or did you decide it was the most suitable thing to give a crack to make?
Oh no, we've gone through tons of fruit and some vegetables, not quite tons of vegetables yet, but we've rescued a lot from landfill. Kumara is the only root vegetable we've used. We've also used cucumber, and rhubarb. We've turned both of those into some amazing sorbets. But yes, kumara is the first root vegetable that we've got our hands on and managed to have such an amazing outcome with a flavour.
Cucumber and rhubarb together or separately?
No, separately.
Okay, good. That's good. So in terms of the texture of the kumara gelato, just talk me through it, because I think of gelato as being sort of more sorbet-y and I just can't get my head around that with a kumara.
A few differences between gelato and ice cream, and sorbet is something entirely different as well. Gelato has less fat in it than ice cream does. It has less air, so it is denser. It also lends to a smoother feel on your palate because it's denser, less air. You wouldn't think it would feel more creamy, but it usually does feel more creamy. There's more protein in it as well, and that kind of lends to what I like to call the stretchiness of gelato that you don't get with ice cream.
Do you have a punnet of it there by any chance? I see those
I
ones.
do in my...
What you prepared earlier. Okay, let's go into... Ooh! Coming out of the fridge, a giant pile of yumminess. Looks about 3 stories high. And what is what have you got on top of it there, please, Hannah?
This is what we would call burnt sugar, like the top part of a creme brulee. The name of the entire flavour is kumara creme brulee. So we played on that as well. We thought it would look nicer than just a whole piece of kumara on top to display the flavour.
Yes, our newsreader is licking her chops here. Can you just give us a run through of the texture and flavour? How would you describe the flavour?
To me, it's custard-like, and that's what we played on. So we went, okay, how can we make this even creamier than what we already knew? And so we put custard in there, we've got kumara in there, and it is like a complex caramel flavour on the palate. We put the flavour to some of our managers, blind taste test, and didn't tell them what it was, and that's exactly what they said. It was like a complex caramel flavour, and so we thought that was a win.
Amazing. We've got to go. The connection's a bit dodgy, but quickly, Hannah, is this a limited edition? Have you just made it for the season?
It is. We will have it in stores from Thursday afternoon onwards, and it will only be running this weekend.
Thank you, Hannah. Great to talk to you. That is Hannah Clark. She's a patisserie engineer. It sounds like the humble kumara needs a bit of engineering, Evie, to turn it into a gelato. It was making you lick your lips, and when it came out of the freezer, it just looked yummy. Anyway, speaking of cold things, the mountain. These 2 people who were rescued off Mount Ngauruhoe over the weekend because they were up there in their trainers and jeans and a hoodie. We spoke to Senior Constable Conrad Smith a little earlier in the program, and he wanted to stress that if you're going walkabout up the mountain, visit the Mountain Safety Council's site, planmywalk.nz for all the safety tips, the gear that you're going to need and the prep that you will need so that they do not have to come and pluck you off the mountainside. This listener says they need to have a proper entranceway that people need to be available to check everyone attempting it, otherwise close the walk. I don't know, where's personal responsibility come in? You're going up a mountain. Tricia from Auckland says ill-prepared trampers caught in dangerous situations should be charged for their emergency services. Interesting. Franken got in touch about Dunedin Council in discussions with Treasury about buying out properties that could be in danger with climate change. And Frank says, as climate change disasters worsen, property buyouts will become more necessary and expensive. This can only be funded by taxation, and a capital gains tax will be the best mechanism to achieve this. The alternative is ad hoc policies that will impact on other services. Interested in your thoughts on that one, 2101. Do we need a climate mitigation, moving to higher ground tax? On the raid at the Thames Mall, second in 3 months, this person says, how about bollards outside the shop? Tick, they've got bollards. And this other person says, feel sorry for the shopkeeper, but thinking CTV, yep, they've got security footage as well. And on the strikes of doctors, this person says, how do the doctors think their pay demands can be funded?
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Tēnā tātou. I'm Evie Ashton. Waikato police have obtained a warrant to arrest Marakopa fugitive Tom Phillips. Mr Phillips disappeared with his 3 children in December 2021 and has been avoiding police. Now police believe he was involved in a bank robbery in Te Koiti in May. They allege he and another unidentified person were armed with guns and demanded cash. Police say they then fled on a black farm-style motorbike. They're urging the public to report any sightings but not to take action themselves, as Mr Phillips may still be armed. He's been charged with aggravated robbery, aggravated wounding and unlawfully possessing a firearm. A senior Christchurch doctor says today's strikes should be a wake-up call about a failing health system. Senior doctors and dentists picketed for 2 hours throughout the country this afternoon over stalled pay negotiations. More than 100 medical professionals gathered opposite Christchurch Hospital's emergency department, many holding placards. Christchurch Hospital oncologist Siobhan Cross says money is only one of the factors at play.
Money is important. It is what's going to get doctors from overseas to New Zealand. It's going to be what stops New Zealand doctors leaving for Australia. But this strike isn't about money primarily. It's about trying to give the health system a wake-up call.
Siobhan Cross says she and her colleagues want to work in a system where they can help make things better, not worse. Te Whatu Ora says mediated talks with the union will continue tomorrow. Nationals campaign manager Chris Bishop is defending social media posts aimed at Labour leader Chris Hipkins after crying foul over ads rolled out by the Council of Trade Unions. It's the first official week on the road and parties are scrapping over tax plans, government spending and whether the campaign's getting dirty. For the second day in a row, Mr Hipkins brandished printouts of National Party ads, accusing it of hypocrisy. Chris Bishop says he wasn't aware of the specific ads outlined.
He should focus on his own policies. I haven't seen that, but yeah, I post all sorts of things, as you well know. I'm an inveterate tweeter, too much.
Chris Hipkins had produced ads from Mr Bishop's Facebook page he said had the basic message he had, quote, done F all for 6 years as a minister, and another on National's page that said even 8-year-olds know better than Hipkins. Meanwhile, the Council of Trade Unions has contacted the police and closed its Wellington office after a member of the public reacted to yesterday's ads attacking National leader Christopher Luxon. The CTU says it had a concerning communication from one person and out of an abundance of caution shut off all floors to public access. But its secretary, Melissa Ansell-Bridges, says it's business as usual and the union will continue with its election campaign. A Thames shop owner says he's devastated and angry after his store was targeted by Ram Raiders. James O'Grady, the owner of Boots and All in the Goldfields Mall, told Checkpoint the offenders used a steel chair to break through his door. It's the second time in less than 3 months that the mall has been raided.
I feel sick to my stomach. I haven't eaten all day. We've just been trying to put the shop back together. We had really nice watches because nobody else was selling a decent watch in the town, so we thought we'd do it. And it's taken 2 years to build that range, and they've come along and smashed all the cabinets and taken in all of that jewellery.
James O'Grady says his customers have been very supportive and are just as angry as he is. The government is targeting the worst youth offenders in an intensive program aimed at stopping them committing more crimes. The program was announced in July and launched today. The Minister for Children, Kelvin Davis, says 60 children between the ages of 10 and 13 who have been continually breaking the law will get mentoring, support and alcohol and drug treatment to try to stop their cycle of crime. The Cuban government says it's uncovered a human trafficking ring aimed at recruiting its citizens to fight for Russia and Ukraine. A statement from the Foreign Ministry in Havana didn't specify who was behind the operation. It says Cuba is firmly against the use of mercenaries. Russia hasn't commented on the allegations. The opposition in Solomon Islands is calling for an inquiry to determine whether a shipment from China last year contained real firearms. Here's the ABC's Stephen Djidzic.
The Chinese embassy brought the consignment into the capital Honiara in March last year. The Royal Solomon Islands Police Force said the crates contained only replica weapons, which would be gifted to them to help train local officers. But now Al Jazeera has revealed that US diplomats in Port Moresby cabled back to Washington at the time, citing an anonymous source who said the weapons appeared to be genuine. Senior opposition MP Peter Kenaloria Jr. says that's concerning.
I think it needs a serious investigation.
The Solomon Islands Foreign Ministry insists that the story is false and no real weapons were allowed in.
And scientists are predicting this year's ozone hole will last for longer than usual, potentially into early summer. Principal atmosphere and climate scientist Dr. Olaf Morgenstern says it's due to a combination of climate change and last year's volcanic eruption in Tonga. He says NIWA scientists will work with NASA and Antarctica New Zealand to measure the chemistry in the atmosphere to get a better understanding of what's going on.
This is what NIWA does on a regular basis. We have instruments in Antarctica that measure ozone and also related species. This year there's also a launch of a balloon is foreseen to gather, airborne data from aloft.
Dr. Olaf Morgenstern says New Zealand will see the effects of ozone depletion from December through to January, and people should be vigilant with sun protection. That's the news.
Kia ora, I'm Hingarangi Forbes, host of Mata. Tonight we have a kōrero with the two leading candidates in Ikoro Rāwhiti, Meka Whaitiri for Te Pāti Māori and Kushla Tangaire Manuel for Labour. Nō reira, ariari taringa mai kia mata after the 6:30 headlines this evening on RNZ National or at rnz.co.nz/mata.
You're back with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland, occasional showers, some heavy. Thunderstorms and downpours possible in the west this afternoon and evening. Auckland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumārunui. Periods of rain, possibly heavy, easing later tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa, also Whanganui to Wellington, including Taihape. Scattered rain, becoming mostly fine in Hawke's Bay and Gisborne tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller. Rain, heavy at times, easing to showers early Wednesday, then rain again from the evening. Westland and Fiordland, rain about Westland, spreading elsewhere this evening, as well as becoming very heavy in Westland. Canterbury, North Otago and Dunedin. Mostly cloudy with patchy rain or drizzle. High cloud tomorrow, possibly light rain from the afternoon. For the remainder of Otago and for Southland, high cloud increasing today with scattered rain, light rain overnight and tomorrow morning. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods, the odd shower tomorrow. The time is coming up to 8 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Thank you, Evie. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Embattled Qantas Chief Executive Alan Joyce is bowing out 2 months earlier than planned. He's made the announcement after a difficult and embarrassing few weeks for the company. That included the national airline being sued for allegedly selling tickets for more than 8,000 flights without disclosing they'd been cancelled, the ABC's Flint Duxfield reports.
After 15 years as the Qantas CEO, Alan Joyce's departure didn't go quite the way he had planned. Coming 2 months before his scheduled retirement, Mr Joyce said in a statement it had become clear that the company needed to move ahead with its renewal as a priority. It's a move analysts say had become inevitable. Helen Bird is a law and corporate governance specialist at Swinburne University.
I think what he's hoping is that by going, some of the oxygen in the debate goes and then Qantas can get on with its job.
In recent weeks, the airline has faced a battering of criticism over its treatment of flight credits during COVID, allegations it exerted undue influence on the government to reduce competition, and most recently an investigation by the competition regulator for allegedly selling tickets to more than 8,000 flights that had already been cancelled. Helen Bird believes while Mr Joyce's statement suggests his early departure was voluntary, shareholder pressure would have been a significant factor.
I have a suspicion that this helps him with his bonus for this year. I think there was some pressure being brought to bear by a number of institutional shareholders to actually make sure the executive were accounting for a number of complaints that have been made this year in their bonuses, and they were looking very sharply to the board to make sure they did that. And now that sort of takes the pressure off that because he's no longer technically an employee of the company.
Alan Joyce is set to receive $4.8 million in bonuses this year, something the Australian Shareholder Association is calling for the board to reject. It's a request that's supported by the Transport Workers Union. Its National Secretary is Michael Caine.
The executive pay of Alan Joyce and his executive team has been excessive. The JobKeeper money should be paid back, and those executive bonuses should be denied.
Alan Joyce is set to be replaced as CEO by Qantas's long-serving Chief Financial Officer, Vanessa Hudson. Mr Kane has welcomed the decision as an opportunity for Qantas to turn over a new leaf.
Yes, she has been next to Alan Joyce for all of these decisions that have led Qantas to this place, and for that reason the Australian public has a right to be concerned that she's cut from the same managerial cloth.
Aviation analysts are also questioning whether the new leadership will bring significant change at Qantas. Neil Hansford has spent more than 4 decades working in the industry. He believes Alan Joyce has copped too much of the criticism for the airline.
To me, the chairman, he's been sitting, copping the very large payments right through all of this, and Richard Goyder should go not long after Alan and have a complete clean out. Let him take 2 or 3 of the long-term directors who clearly have not been fulfilling their role in the oversight of the Qantas product.
Alan Joyce has been with Qantas for 22 years, 15 of those as CEO. Previously, he'd been at Jetstar, and before that, Ansett Australia and the Irish carrier Aer Lingus. Aviation analyst from airlineratings.com, Geoffrey Thomas, says in all the recent controversy, there's a risk Mr Joyce's successors are being forgotten.
When he took over Qantas, the share price was 99 cents. He took it to, just prior to COVID, to $7.50. That benefits shareholders, which in many cases are superannuation funds, which means everyday Australians. So there was benefits Australia-wide of his tenure at Qantas.
But Swinburne University's Helen Bird says Mr Joyce's legacy must be about more than financial success.
Yes, money's been made and circumstances have encouraged that, and Joyce has been pivotal to that. But every other aspect of the company's life, I think, is lesser for it.
Qantas will no doubt be hoping the new CEO, Vanessa Hudson, can restore the airline's reputation. But its woes may not all depart with Alan Joyce. The federal opposition is seeking support from the Greens and crossbenchers for a Senate inquiry into the government's decision to refuse Qatar Airways' request for extra flights, something Qantas had welcomed. With that and ongoing pressure for the airline to refund some of the government support it received during COVID, Helen Bird believes Vanessa Hudson will have a lot on her plate.
She is in some respects tarnished with the Joyce approach to running Qantas, and she was the CFO after all. But this is her moment of leadership. It's up to her to determine how she's going to go forward. The board hasn't changed. The board was very pro-Joyce, so it'll be interesting to see how they would approach any attempt by her to change the dial and the way they ran the company.
Organisers at the Burning Man Festival have opened the main road out of the site and have started letting people leave. Tens of thousands of festival goers were stuck at the event in Nevada after heavy rain turned the arts event into a mud bath. Organisers had asked people to shelter in place until the weather improved. The ABC's Barbara Miller has the story.
Plans for the Burning Man's signature event, the burning of a huge wooden effigy, to go ahead last night were cancelled late on.
I got all dressed up because they told us they were going to do the burn tonight, but now they called it off because it rained twice today for about 1 hour each time. But apparently that's the end of it.
But festival goers, including Angie Peacock, are still more or less upbeat. Several days after 2 to 3 months' worth of rain fell on the encampment in Nevada's Black Rock Desert in one night.
All my shoes are ruined. I need tons of laundry to be done. But anyway, our spirits are high. No, there's no Ebola. No, there's no fence. I mean, you guys, I've heard the most ridiculous stories ever.
Attendees of the annual arts festival who'd been told to conserve food and water woke to sunny skies. But news on Burning Man Info Radio that the main exit was still closed.
Listen, we do not currently have an estimated time for the roads to be dry enough for the Jedi RVs and vehicles from the Republic to navigate safely.
But the road is now opening as the sun dries out the clay-like mud.
It's like a wet cement that sticks to everything. It's impossible to drive on and it sticks to your shoes. You can't walk properly. You had no choice but to stay where you were.
ABC producer Jamie Cummins, who's been stuck at Burning Man, was preparing to join the long line of vehicles waiting to get out.
It's Monday morning and the sun is shining for the first time in days. I'm talking to you from the muddy mess that is my camp. After sheltering in our RV from the cold, we're finally packing up our stuff and getting the green light to leave.
It's the end of a public holiday weekend in the US and many people have to get back home. But organisers are urging those who are able to wait another day before packing up camp to do so. David Date, a veteran festival attendee, told CNN the right thing to do is stay put.
You know, when times get rough, the burners got to stick it out. We got to do what's right and make sure that this event can exist. But people who aren't burners have shown up in mass and they only party and they're leaving their entire campsites behind, ditching their cars, their trash, their tents. And we're going to end up having to clean this up.
Many will likely spend at least one more night in the Black Rock Desert, where this year's festival is testing the limits of one of the event's core principles of radical self-reliance. And where, in what could be third time lucky, it's hoped tonight the man effigy can finally be burned.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has been meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin in the Russian city of Sochi, aiming to bring the Black Sea grain deal back to life. But Putin refused and says the deal won't be restored until sanctions on Russian exports are lifted. Here's Deutsche Welle's Nita Blake-Person.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan travelled to Russia for what he hoped would be a mediation mission aimed at bringing a vital wartime grain deal back to life. But after 3 hours of talks with President Vladimir Putin, there was no agreement, with Putin instead doubling down on his own demands.
We are ready to consider the possibility of reviving the grain deal. I told President Erdogan this once again. We will do this as soon as agreements on lifting restrictions on the export of Russian agricultural products are fully implemented.
Ukraine and Russia are major suppliers of wheat, barley, sunflower oil and other goods that developing nations rely on. An export deal is seen as essential to addressing global food security. A previous deal allowing safe passage through the Black Sea collapsed in July after Moscow pulled out. The United Nations worked with Turkey to broker that agreement, and President Erdogan hopes that they can do the same again.
We believe that the Black Sea Initiative should be resumed with its shortcomings addressed. In consultation with the United Nations, we've prepared a new package of proposals containing significant progress. I believe that it is possible to achieve results through this new process.
Russia's African allies are among the importers struggling with food access due to the Black Sea blockade. Putin says a deal is close on allowing free grain to 6 so far unnamed African states. But a wider agreement allowing millions of tonnes of grain to make it to the global market remains elusive.
Thousands of teachers in South Korea have walked out on strike over bullying. In super competitive South Korea, primary school teachers have taken the action as part of demands for protection from bullying parents. It comes after one young teacher died by suicide in July. The BBC's Seoul correspondent Jean Mackenzie reports.
In the weeks since Min-so took her own life, her cousin Park Do-young has been keeping her goldfish alive.
How often do you come here to feed the fish?
Min-so isn't the teacher's real name, but her family have asked us not to reveal it. After Min-so's suicide, Do-young started investigating and found his cousin had been overwhelmed by work and bombarded with complaints from parents.
I know you have her diary, and that's what has helped you understand what was happening.
I can see from her entries she was struggling more and more. She would worry about the children misbehaving because the parents would blame her. They'd say, "My child doesn't misbehave. Isn't this your fault?"
This death has unleashed a wave of anger across the country from teachers who all have similar stories. This is now the third weekend they've taken to the streets here in Seoul to protest. The teachers say they are often harassed by parents. Sometimes the complaints are sinister. They can be accused of child abuse for restraining a student or emotional abuse for telling them off. Chinso, why are you here today?
저도 이제 2번 정도
I'm here because I've been in this teacher's shoes. I've also experienced toxic complaints that drove me to have suicidal thoughts.
I've come to the school where Minso used to work. This is one of the wealthiest areas of the country, and teachers in these areas say they get more complaints because the parents, who are often doctors and lawyers, are so invested in their children's success. Hi, Professor Kim.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. It's very quiet, no students at the moment.
Yeah, because this is vacation season.
Professor Kim Bong-jae trains future teachers at Seoul National University of Education and has witnessed this culture creep in.
Welcome to my room. Yeah.
학교 교사들에 대해서 매우 존경하는
Traditionally, teachers in Korea were highly respected, but the economy has grown so fast, and many parents are now highly educated. Parents often look down on teachers and have a strong sense of entitlement.
생각합니다.
You arm wrestling?
Yeah.
I've come to get a parent's perspective. Shin Min-hyang runs a parents' rights organisation. Do you think this culture of parents complaining has gone too far?
Some of the behavior highlighted recently is unacceptable, but these cases are the outliers. A lot of us are now worried that the channels we use to communicate our concerns will be cut off.
The government has admitted its classrooms are broken and has issued new guidance for teachers, which states they can remove disruptive children from class. But many here argue that it's not just classrooms which are broken. They say Korea's entire education system needs to be reformed.
The number of holiday visa applications is on the rise in Australia as backpackers head back down under. While backpacker numbers dropped substantially during the pandemic, new data suggests numbers could be climbing back to pre-pandemic levels. But the new challenge could be finding work when they arrive. Here's the ABC's Elizabeth Cramsey.
Thomas is an accommodation manager at a Brisbane hostel, which he says is 90% full most days.
A lot of the backpackers I'm meeting now, they said they would have come before, but COVID prevented them. And so they're itching to get to Australia, and specifically Queensland, because they've heard good things about it. Brisbane is a popular gateway for the Gold and Sunshine Coasts and Byron Bay in New South Wales. Yeah, a lot of Europeans for sure. Lots of French, Italian and Dutch. But also you've still got the South American people arriving who are here to study English, but also first few weeks they like to do some travelling as well. New data from the Department of Home Affairs shows Australia's backpacker boom is back. More than 111,000 applications for working holidaymaker visas were granted between July and December last year, compared to only 23,000 in the same period of 2021. Griffith University cultural geographer Kaya Barry says the pandemic had a huge impact that lasted longer than many anticipated.
When the borders finally fully reopened early last year, I think a lot of us thought that backpackers would just hop on a plane and come, but anybody who tried to book an international flight last year remembers how expensive the flights were. They still weren't running to a full service, so it was quite hard to actually get a ticket into Australia and quite expensive, which for young people who are on a backpacking trip, that was quite a big cost. But also, I mean, people that I interviewed last year were saying that, you know, they'd waited quite a long time, even after the border opened, because they were worried about what if Australia locked down again, what if there were more tight health restrictions.
She thinks Australia is likely to see numbers continue to rise through 2023. But the challenge now will be finding work.
A lot of farms, because they were lacking backpackers and other labour sources during the pandemic, a lot of farms moved to using Pacific Islanders who were on the PALM scheme, which is the Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Visa Scheme. And so a lot of jobs that were perhaps filled by backpackers, that work that used to be done by backpackers is now being filled by this longer-term palm visa.
And that could impact how long they stay.
So rather than staying a full year and getting a second-year visa because they've done their required farm work, they might only stay a few months. And so the industries and communities that I've been talking to over the last couple of months are starting to see that backpackers are moving from town to town quite quickly looking for work but not able to find a job.
Hostel manager Thomas says housing isn't easy either.
A lot of them want to live in a house share or flat share, but there's not a lot of accommodation for Australians, let alone backpackers, so hence why a lot of backpackers are having to stay in hostels long term.
But he says if backpackers come, hostels are happy to have them.
A major issue for space scientists is how to provide energy for astronauts wanting to stay for long periods on the moon or other planets. While this problem may have been resolved, according to researchers at Bangor University in North Wales. The BBC's John Donnison has the details.
The moon continues to mystify. India, the latest country to launch a lunar mission earlier this summer. But while it successfully landed an unmanned module, NASA has said it wants to set up a permanent manned base on the moon by 2030. But to do that, you need power.
Are these the 10-gram samples?
Now, scientists at the University of Bangor say they've developed small nuclear fuel cells, stable enough to be transported into space.
The moon's dark half of a month, so we can't rely on solar energy, we can't rely on solar PV and things like that, although I imagine they'll be part of the mix. But we also need to have that thing for when it's dark, to have electricity and energy generation there when it's dark. So that's where nuclear comes in.
More tests are needed, but the hope is Bangor's fuel cells could power micro-nuclear generators currently being developed by Rolls-Royce. And the real prize is Mars, with some believing that establishing a manned base on the moon could provide a gateway to the red planet.
In Spain, at least 3 people have died and others remain missing after record rainfall caused flooding at the centre of the country. Roads and train lines have had to be closed and officials used helicopters to reach some of those affected. The BBC's Guy Hedgecoe reports.
This weather event was a dramatic and deadly end to the Spanish summer, striking just as many people were returning to work after the holidays. The central province of Toledo was one of the worst hit areas. A man died after being trapped in a lift there, apparently because of the flooding. Another man was already dead when rescue services reached him near his car. Just west of Madrid, one man is still missing after his car was swept away, although his 10-year-old son was rescued after clinging to a tree for 8 hours. Just over a week ago, many parts of the country were seeing temperatures of up to 40 Celsius. Spain often sees heavy rain at the end of the summer, but this weather event, caused by a mass of low pressure, has been much more extreme than normal. In and around Madrid, where rivers burst their banks, flooding has damaged homes and left many residents struggling to keep the water out. 200 people were evacuated.
The water came into the house as if it was a wave. It went upstairs and we panicked a bit. We tried to solve the problem as best we could. We put the dog on the roof.
The flooding caused severe travel disruption, with an estimated 60,000 rail passengers affected. The high-speed rail link between Madrid and the southern Andalusia region has now resumed, but other services have been disrupted throughout the day. The extreme weather has now eased off.
A little bit of your feedback before we head off for the evening on the Tongariro crossing. This is the 2 unprepared hikers who had to get helicoptered off the mountain because they were just in their trainers and jeans. This person says on the Tongariro crossing walkways there are full life-size cutouts of dock staff telling you to turn around if you're not properly dressed, equipped, or if the weather is bad. Those tourists should be fined or charged for their rescue. Their stupidity beggars belief, says Nick. On the striking doctors, this listener says, I'm a GP, my husband is a senior hospital doctor. The strike pay rise issue is complex. Paying doctors more will not solve the problems and unhappiness with the health system that doctors are feeling. Doctors get paid enough to have comfortable lives. Money needs to be put into medical students' training, infrastructure, resources, more employed doctors. That will improve doctors' satisfaction way more than extra personal dollars. Thank you so much for your feedback. That is about it from us. The Late News team is going to keep you updated throughout the evening. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m, First Up talks tax, teeth and targets, all the T's, with the Greens co-leader James Shaw. Brew a coffee, get up, 5 a.m. for that one. You won't want to miss it. We'll catch you a little later in the day. Have a good night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. I'm Evie Ashton. Waikato police believe missing father, Tom Phillips, was involved in an armed bank robbery in Tekowiti in May. They've obtained a warrant for the arrest of Mr Phillips, who disappeared with his 3 children in December 2021. Te Whatu Order says mediated pay talks with the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists will continue tomorrow. More than 5,500 senior doctors and dentists walked out for 2 hours today. Dunedin's mayor is asking the government for an initial $25 million to help buy properties in the city's flood-prone south. Jules Raddick expects the council to buy 65 properties each year. And a Japanese man has admitted starting a fire at an animation studio that killed 36 people. Shinji Aoba said his ideas had been stolen. Those are the headlines. Mata is next, and our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow after 1 p.m, her name is Amelia. She's a bluefin tuna who completely changed our understanding of these magnificent and valuable fish. Well, like the famous aviator she's named after, Amelia crossed the Atlantic when no one thought it was possible. I'll speak to journalist Karen Pynchon, who looks at the science and the politics of ocean-travelling tuna and the humans trying to save the species from extinction. That's with me, Susie Ferguson, in for Jessie Mulligan from 1 p.m. tomorrow on RNZ National.
Nau mai te koanga ki te whenua. Tēnei te kaupeka tau e tohu ana I ngā timatanga hou. Ka pērā hoki ki te ao tōranga pū, me ngā matikau e tohe ana ki te pūāwai. Welcome to Mata with me, Mihi Ngarangi Forbes, brought to you by Te Māngai Pāho and the Public Interest Journalism Fund. Joining me in studio today are 2 special guests to talk about one of the most significant seats this election. Ko ngā wāhine ēnei e tātā whainga ana mo te turu o Ikaro Rāwhiti. Ara, ko te kaitono mo Reipa, ko Kushla Tangaire Manuel, rawa ko te kaitono mo te